The most important questions about AI shouldn't be how to prompt or how AI hallucinates. They should be about us.
Who shapes these systems? What do we want to become together? What kind of world are we weaving?
Welcome to Between Us and the Machine.
With Margot van Brakel
and Juliette McDowell.
Don't forget to subscribe.
Welcome. When Margot and I started this podcast, we weren't trying to create another show about how AI is taking our jobs or making our life easier. What we were interested in was something different. What kind of world are we building through these technologies? And after a season of conversations, I think what surprised me the most was that none of our guests really wanted to talk about the technology in depth. They wanted to talk about people.
Yeah.
So, Margot, I'm really interested in your reflections on the season.
I love how you say that. And in the end, that's what it is, isn't it? It's that technology is just a means to an end. And to apply this technology in the right way, things need to happen. And I think looking at all the guests that we had, I loved every conversation. It's like what stood out for me is the passion and the dedication and the commitment to take responsibility. And so all these people, they're not these, outspoken people with huge audiences. They're people that step into, like, on the stage, step into the arena because of the responsibility that they feel. And so there's so much authenticity, but even more the knowledge and the expertise that they bring to the conversation. I think every conversation gave me a new insight, things that, like, my vocabulary is expanded with all these different things, like the model drift, never heard of this, or the attention integrity, things like this that I became aware of. So I think creating the awareness, bringing this awareness on all the different aspects that come along with a world wherein AI is playing an increasing role. The awareness on all these things are important.
Yeah. And what struck me was really how often our guests challenge our assumptions that most of us don't even realize we're carrying. So, for example, David Mazzini did that for me. He challenged this idea that we're isolated individuals making independent decisions. And when he spoke about Ubuntu and this idea that we become human through relationships, that really inspired me. And I kept thinking about it long after the interview. And, much of technology is built around the individual. And very few of us actually lived it like this. So we live in relationship, we live in community, we have families, histories, and responsibilities with us. And those systems that we're building assume that we're solitary decision makers, and that gap and that mismatch between how we actually live and how these systems imagine us, that really felt important to me, that conversation.
That's touching. The way that you phrase it is touching on something that I've been thinking of the past weeks. It's about, in Dutch, we say verharden and verzachten. So one is like the toughness and the other is the softness. And I think if you stay in the mind, in the ratio, the course you are on is towards this toughness. And if you bring in the softness, that comes through connection. You can't, it's like connection, like opening up for this. We are social creatures. That's our foundation. And yes, Michael, he brought that in, like, so this, like, that's a lot of the guests that we had. They bring in these ideas in the arena of AI where you thought, huh? really, Ubuntu and AI? And then after we spoke to them, it's so obvious. Of course, it's all this human values that we need to think of, we need to embrace and weave into how we work with AI. Yeah.
Yeah. And when I came into these discussions, I came in thinking about rules and regulations, to be honest, right? And what I realized is that, at least from our guest, I realized that governance starts with values.
Hmm. Hmm.
And before you're going to regulate anything, you have to answer more fundamental questions,
Yeah.
like about human dignity. What are we trying to protect?
Mm.
And I think in particular, like, are we protecting community, children, democracy? And if we don't answer that question first,
Mhm.
then regulations become disconnected from the reason they exist. And so recently, what in the news just the other day, you have the UK banning smartphones, and
Mm.
okay, that's not AI. It's banning smartphones for under 16. That's not AI, but those are technologies that do affect us deeply. And they're banning it not because just someone told them to, but because people asked, like, what kind of childhood do we want?
Mm.
What do we want for our children?
Mm.
And the answer was, one where attention belongs to the children and not corporate business models. And I think that's really important.
Yeah. And another thing on the governance is, so, governance is important, but it's not like something that is inspiring for me, right? It's the rules and the regulations. It's like the guardrails, and yes, it's super important. But then we had Brittany, and she's this bubbly personality bringing all this energy with her AI governance framework. And then I thought, oh, the way that you approach governance, it can also be that way. Like, so yeah, it's so many things so the assumptions, like, it doesn't have to be that way. Governance is important, and it doesn't have to be boring and yeah, like forced, I don't know. But and the responsibility, so that is like with the smartphone uh, regulations in the UK, and I see same discussions happening in other countries. It's about what kind of world do we want to build, and taking the responsibility for the future that we allow for our children. And one of the I think one of the conversations that touched me was how Michael spoke of love, and thinking, what does love look like if there's so much AI moving into the space of relationships, and we fill up loneliness for vulnerable people by pushing AI companions in that arena. And yes, the question, what do we want love to look like for future generations? This is a super important question. And yeah,
And also, who gets to decide, who gets a voice in it? So one of the things I liked about Anissa's conversation, right, when she was talking about humanitarian work, and I have a humanitarian work background,
mhm,
and I've seen myself consequences of decisions made by people who are far away, right? And sometimes bad intentions. So back to the governance, sometimes bad intentions don't usually cause problems, but it's usually people who are trying to help, right? And if you're not listening to the communities, you're not asking them, you're not involving them in understanding the context, then you're creating harm. And that episode really spoke deeply to that,
mhm,
and to that pattern in AI, who gets heard, how AI was developed with whose information, who defines the problem, like who's benefiting, who's carrying the risks, and they're not technical questions, right?
mhm,
So okay, we spoke about model drift, and that was technical, but they're human questions, and those are the questions that actually
Mm,
matter, and that's your focus on the human.
mm. I also have to think of this episode with Anissa a lot. Because she spoke of the LLM models and like the language models, and what language do we use to train the models, and realizing that the models are trained with the Western languages, and
Logic, yeah.
with everything that comes with that. And one of the things that I experienced was, this is a fun example. So I used Notebook LM, and in Notebook LM you can turn information into a podcast. And so I've been listening to quite a few audios where this tool has been used to produce podcast in Dutch.
Oh,
And one of the things that I noticed, it's like in Dutch, it all feels so exaggerated. And then I listened to, so I made, I wanted to do something quickly, and then I didn't think of the language. So the audio that came out was in English. So I listened to that, and then I realized the English language, and in this case, it was also American voices. So the way that the language deals with like exaggerations, or it's completely different than in the Dutch language. So in Dutch we are very, keep it simple, don't overdo it, very downplaying it.
yeah.
And
No
so
superlative.
that's why the Dutch audio felt exaggerated, like, so over the top. But then I listened to the English one and I thought, oh, it's very normal in English, so it feels very natural.
Well,
There's
in American
nothing.
English, because British are not like that, but
I know,
American.
I know, but it's American English, and then I thought, this is logical. And then even this, so these are two Western countries. But what happens if we like bring in like this one way of communicating and phrasing things, and onto, yeah, this AI that reaches everyone, and then just like there are cultures where you have all these words that we don't have in the Western world, that are just like neglected. Yeah, I so this was a very eye-opening experience that I thought, like, the Netherlands and the US, in culture, it's still the Western world, but then there's this whole other continents. Imagine what the gap would be there, if we enforce the Western way of thinking through the AIs. So that was, yeah. So she made me think of this. Yeah.
Yeah, and since AI is developed largely by the West, I think the term is that it's largely, oh, I forget the term, but it's very biased towards Western values, but it's also a mirror. And so that's the name of this episode, right? It's the mirror we built, and that name even was inspired by Cornelia Walther that we had here just recently, and when she described AI as a mirror, and that
Mm,
I think that's, to me, that's the metaphor that best captures the entire season, right? The system that reflects us, that reflects our priorities, our assumptions, our blind spots, our
mm,
values. And sometimes what we see in the mirror is inspiring, right? And sometimes it's uncomfortable and sometimes it's painful. And the mirror itself is not the story, it's the reflection that is.
mm. Yeah.
And what this reflection shows us, what we do with what we see, whether we change it or look away from it. And then that's the story. And that's what the season's been about. And so I'd like to, after the season, I think each of us have our own priorities and what we're going to do with the learnings and move forward. So I'd like to just ask you, what you, yeah, how this has been for you and what your next steps are.
Mm. So we started on this journey. You said, let's do a podcast, and I thought, oh wow, cool, let's do a podcast. And we had all these amazing guests, um, and uh, it opened, so it increased my awareness in all the challenges that we have, like you say about the mirror. The mirror has many sides, so it's just like, where do you put the mirror? So I always like the idea of a looking box. You know, you have this looking box that we used to make as a kid, and then we tend to, like, the whole idea is that you have this little hole at the beginning of the looking box, and that's the way that you look at things. But what if you change the position of the hole? So what if you put like a little peeking hole on the side or on the top? It's still the same reality, but you're going to see different things. And I think that's what these conversations have done, that they showed us different things on what's happening in the AI arena. Um, and for me, it's also made me think of, so I'm busy with the balance between AI and the human. And this was like a deep dive into looking through things with AI in the context. And I am missing the human focus. So I had to realize that what I want to work on, and what my like area is, as Dr. Walter phrased it, you have the double literacy. I thought that was a perfect way she brought it. So she said, what we need is hybrid intelligence, and that comes with double literacy. So there's a lot of talk in organizations that we need AI literacy. All the employees need to be AI literate. But what about the human literacy? What about opening up to the human potential? And so, yes, that is what I what my area of work is. So, as much as I'm fascinated by AI, I have realized that I want to focus back on this human intelligence. And really, there's so much to do, even in, yeah, in in the discussions. There's a lot of discussions on AI, but where is the human? You know, we need to open up time awareness on all this potential that we have, by working on human intelligence. So that's what this has done for me, is refocus to think of where do I want to put my efforts. So that's why at some point I let you know, Juliet, as much as I love these conversations, I need to move away, and bring back the focus to the human.
Yeah, Margot, it's been a wonderful season with you, and having you as part of the conversation, and who also reminds us about the human was really important. And when we started this, we called the podcast Between Us and the Machine, but now I think about it, the, you know, the most important word in that title isn't the machine. It's us, and you've showed me this: the relationship, the values, the responsibilities, the questions we're willing to ask together.
Mm-hmm.
And, the Vatican encyclical asking whether we lost sight of human dignity. Ubuntu scholars saying, we're relational beings,
Yeah.
not isolated consumers, and humanitarian workers risking their own safety to protect dignity of people in crisis. Lawyers fighting over the right for our attention, technologists walking away from companies because their integrity demanded it, and teachers and parents saying, what do our children need and what future do we want for ourselves? And the future isn't going to be determined by what's technically possible. It's going to be determined by what we collectively decide what matters and what we collectively allow or disallow. And we're still writing that story. And so the question for people who are listening is, what part of the story do you want to write? So, you mentioned earlier in this conversation that we didn't find people who had the biggest followings. We found the ones who had something to say. And, the questions that we need people to ask in their own room, or, in their own organizations, their community, is, where will you refuse to accept that this is just how it is? And what part of the story do you want to write? Where will you insist on the intention, on putting people first? Because we still have some time and we have a choice.
Hmm.
We have each other. And that's what I've learned this season between us.
Yeah.
Thank you, Margot.
Thank you. Thank you, Juliet. It really was a pleasure. And I think you drive this show. So I'm looking forward to everything that's going to happen, the future conversations, and the dedication you put in to bringing this awareness and to feeding the responsibility that we need to take for AI. Because, as you said, it's not happening to us; it's happening with what we allow it to do. I think we have agency. I think that's super important. So thank you for inviting me on this journey. And yeah, there are going to be so many amazing conversations in your future episodes. I'm looking forward to those. Thank you, Juliet.
Thank you, Margot.
That's it for today. Thanks for being part of this conversation.
Subscribe wherever you listen and share this with someone who should hear it.
This is Between Us
And the Machine.